Hi, everyone. Welcome to UnDeletable Dad. This is a session about making better rules, about how to be better at following up with consequences. These are tips and tools that I have created specifically for divorced fathers, for alienated dads. This requires a whole different type of parenting. Give me 1 second here as I make sure. There we go. I think we're on. Good. Okay, just had to make sure I was streaming everywhere. Being a father in the circumstances of parental alienation, or even of any kind of high conflict divorce situation, requires very, very different tools. And many of them are going to be not at all conventional, because this is not conventional parenting. It's not a conventional situation. You don't have two parents living under the same roof. It is not possible to do ordinary style parenting when one of the parents is kind of undermining your authority with your kids. However, it doesn't mean that it's less necessary to do that. You have to find a way to do this. Not just your relationship with your kids depends on it, which it does, but the development of your children depends on you figuring this out and mastering it. Because as you're going to hear, I'm going to tell you, your kids depend on the kind of rules, discipline, boundaries that you give them as a father, because that is a fatherly, it's part of your fatherhood codes to do those jobs. It's part of the father function, as Carl Jung would call it, right? There's a psychological function attached to the jobs that father brings to his children. So those don't go away because you got divorced, and you don't get off the hook. And in many respects, it will be harder, but it's going to be immensely rewarding for you when you figure this out. And I'm going to start with a very brief story, because this is really something really current. Over the weekend, I was in touch with a former one-to-one client, someone who worked with me a couple of years ago, who had been having a great deal of trouble with his own son, who was about 12 at the time. The son was resisting everything about this divorce, everything about the dad's new partner, regular meltdowns, regular wrecked family holidays, regular having to leave early from outings and events, missing out on things. It was threatening his ability to move in together with his new partner, which was a very much desired thing for both of them. And on the weekend, he sent me a selfie of himself and his partner and their 2 kids, all just beaming. And this boy, who is now 14 or 15, was in the picture, just smiling from ear to ear, a genuinely happy smile. And I wrote back and said, okay, I know that we did good work together and things were moving along in the right direction, but this is like next level, like I'm so happy to see this. And he said that they were lucky enough to have a reunification therapist who somehow really got through to the biological mom, and she stopped acting up. She stopped putting emotional pressure on the kids to resist their dad and to not be able to get along with him. So the work that we did together involved him really learning as a dad how to have new kind of boundaries and how to stand up for himself and how to apply consequences in a completely different way than what he'd been doing, because he was yo-yoing between being a total pushover and being a complete asshole, and like being a hard nose, and there wasn't anything in between. And he was just being these 2 unreasonable poles of parenting that weren't doing anything but getting him anywhere. And it wasn't until he learned how to do these techniques that I'm going to share with you that everything changed for him. And it really opened the door to other interventions working better. You know, that's what I'm trying to get at here. So what I'm going to share with you today, and welcome to people who are listening to the podcast. This will show up also on the UnDeletable Dad podcast. What I'm sharing with you today is one small part of a larger video program I have called Restorative Parenting, again, which has been designed specifically to restore the parenting relationship for fathers after divorce and during alienation and in all the phases from young kids through teenagehood, because that's often a time when the rules and the boundaries take on a new meaning, right? So the first thing I have to mention is that rules and consequences, which is that's the back end of the rule, is what happens if you don't follow the rule, right? These things are important to the safety and security sense of your children. It's important for them to grow up feeling safe and secure in the world, that they have dealt with these issues with you specifically as a dad. And it relates very much to what I talk about the alienating parent, the three things that an alienating parent tells the child in different ways, but they all boil down to three core things. You're not safe with your dad. You're not really loved by your dad. And your dad doesn't really see you. He doesn't get you. He doesn't know who you really are, right? Those are the three areas where the alienator is going to jab in order to get their hooks into your child. So we have to address first and foremost this safety piece, okay? And I'm not talking about your dad's been taken in a boat without a life jacket, although that might be, I have one client whose ex-wife was telling his son that the food in the house wasn't safe because all of his food is expired and it's poisonous, whatever, and the kid wouldn't eat in the house. So that's a thing. It's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is the fact that rules are really a kind of a boundary around the child, and what's on the inside is safe and what's on the outside is kind of dangerous. It's risky, right? And here's the point. Engaging with risk is one of the important fatherhood codes. It's one of the things that you are gifting to your child from your place as a father. It is a thing that fathers do. They help their children learn to go out into the world and engage with risk. They do that with you beside them. They do it from their earliest days and weeks of life because dads and moms interact with kids in different ways. This is how it came to be that dads are more likely to throw their kids up in the air and catch them, right? They have these little safe interactions, safe from your point of view because you're completely in control, right? But you are helping them to engage with the unknown, to engage with risk. And in order to do that, they have to know where to step, which is the side of what's safe and what's not safe, so that they can step their toe outside of that box and come back inside and have these little experiences of pushing the boundaries, but not going so far that they really could be in a place that you couldn't help them. That's going to come later on. That is a part of teenagehood. That's what makes it so fucking difficult as a parent, is that they need to go farther than they think you can catch them. It's part of the deal. But kids start out as toddlers, going a little bit away from where you're sitting and then running back to you, and going a little bit farther away and looking at you and making sure that you're watching. Dad, are you watching? Dad, can you see what I'm, Dad, watch, right? That's what that's about. They're making sure that they're connected with you so that you can see what they're doing and comment on the safety of it and allow them to experiment with walking along the edge of a, of a wall that they might fall off, or going on the monkey bars or something, right? They want to know that you're watching and that you are seeing them experiment outside the boundaries. So your rules are in place to help them engage with these boundaries. They are not in place for you to just um, get respected, okay, and to have your own inner child like validated in being, elevated as an authority, because you just want to be an authority, and they hear some little kids and they bloody well better know that you're the dad. Like, that's not a thing. That's not, it's not real. It's not very effective. You might have been raised by an authoritarian father, but probably you weren't going from two households that your parents were not divorced, right? Even any kind of authoritarian parenting is not very effective, in the sense that the kids age out of that. They age out of being afraid of you. They come to a point where they can move out and they don't have to have your rules anymore, either through running away from home or just by like getting a job and joining the real world, where they can give you a big finger and say, thanks for nothing. I, you know, you don't want kids who are afraid of you. You don't want kids who get better at hiding how they're not following your rules. You don't want to raise them into being better at sneaking around, right? So, where do you go as a father if this pathway of respect and authority isn't open to you? And by the way, it isn't open not just because kids are going to age out of it, but because they live with a mom who's telling them that they don't have to respect you. And you cannot change that, no matter how mad you get about it. So we have to be smarter. Just be smarter and stop fighting. Stop pouring out so much energy at changing what the mom is doing, and put that energy into getting the result you want with your kids. So, in place of respect, which is the old school version of how to do rules and boundaries and child raising, right? That was all about authority. We're going to look at these 4 styles of parenting according to any school of modern child psychology or parenting theory. These come from a theorist by the name of Diana Baumrind. The 4 styles, she has different names for them, but I'm going to call them hardline, pushover, head in the sand, and leadership. So the hard line is the one we were just talking about, like my way or the highway. I'm the boss of this house. The pushover is the buddy who's just buddies and lets them do whatever they want. Yeah, sure, stay up later. Yeah, sure, have a beer with me. Yeah, sure, you can bring girls to the house. Whatever it might be, right? It's always giving in. Yeah, I know I said that you had to do your homework before supper, but what the heck? You'll do it later or tomorrow or whatever, right? That's the pushover, which is not parenting, right? That's feeding your need to be liked, to be seen as a good guy, to not have to do the hard work. Um, it's not very effective in raising kids, because they can't count on you to tell them what's safe and not safe. They can only count on you to want to say what's going to make them happy. And in the 30 seconds, in the immediate present, that feels like the right thing to do. But it is not very effective as a parenting tool. So that was the pushover. Head in the sand is the guy who just doesn't even look up from his newspaper, from his scrolling his phone, from playing a video game. Maybe you have supper with your kids, but most of the time you're in your garage doing your thing and they are just kind of raising themselves. They'll come home when they're hungry. It's that style of parenting. But leadership is what she would call the authoritative style. It's not authoritarian with the big gavel that says, like, I'm the boss around here. Authoritative parenting is leadership. So we are going to lean into this leadership energy because nobody can undermine your leadership. Your ex-wife can undermine your authority, but she doesn't get to say anything about your leadership because it's not open for judgment. Leadership has a job to do and it does it regardless of what anybody thinks. You're not looking for thumbs up or approval from anybody outside of yourself. So here are 5 steps, specific actionable steps. You can write them down. You can watch this again or listen to this again and write them down and think about how this is going to work in your household. But when you are making rules from a place of leadership, you are going to lead a discussion about rules. This doesn't mean you are letting them make their own rules. It means you are leading a discussion. Leading means you know where it's going. You know where it's going, but you are essentially chairing a discussion about maybe all of the rules, maybe one specific rule. You know that in my restorative parenting program, there is a module about holding a family meeting and how to do that. Super good idea. I mean, regular family meetings, it's not a good idea to have a one-off about something because that's just going to leave the wrong flavor. But regular family meetings are a fantastic hack into this kind of rule making. Okay. So when you lead this kind of discussion, you want to make sure that you're going for consensus and not for compromise. Okay. Compromise is a situation where everybody gives up something. Everybody comes away a little bit not happy. Everybody has sacrificed something, and hopefully all the sacrifices are the same. We don't want anyone to go away feeling like they sacrificed something. Consensus means that we take as long as it takes until everyone agrees. And that could take a lot longer than saying, your bedtime is 8:30. I don't want to hear another word about it. Go to your room, right? So as you are leading a discussion, what are going to be the discussion points? How are you going to do this in a way that keeps you in charge in the leadership role and not being just overwhelmed or bowled over? How are you going to do this in a way that doesn't let you fall back into this old school desire for respect and authority, and it doesn't make you run away from the problem by just bending over and agreeing? So the first question you want to know is, why does this matter? This particular issue, okay? It can be bedtime. It can be allowance. It can be manners. I worked with a client one-on-one for whom manners were a really, really big deal. There was a whole, it was meaningful to him because of how he had been raised by a grandfather who was known for his good manners. And this was a really important part of what he wanted to transmit to his children, maybe more so than other people. But for him, manners were really, really important. It could be about homework. It could be about dating. Think about teenage girls and dating. Think about your 12-year-old daughters and dating, right? Rules are important. Boundaries are important, and they are absolutely important for safety, even if you are the only one who knows why, and she doesn't understand why. So why does this matter? You want to know, why does this matter to you as the dad? And why does this matter to your child? Those are both really important questions. So you have to ask yourself, why does this matter to me? Like the 8 o'clock or the 8:30 bedtime. Why is this important? And there can be a lot of different reasons why it's important to you. One of them might be that you want the rest of your evening back, especially if you have kids there a lot of the time, or even all of the time, right? Yeah, you don't want your kids around until 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. You want some time to decompress on your own. That's completely legitimate, okay? Or allowance. Why is it important to you that your kids have a certain amount of allowance, or how it's given out, whether it just is an amount every week or whether it's attached to doing a certain set of chores, whatever it might be? Why is that important to you? What value is that supporting? Once again, in restorative parenting and in some of my other programs, I think in reversing parental alienation, there's a whole unit about going into your values and really boiling that down until you can find two values that you couldn't live without, that you can't be you without those values. Because when you value everything, or when you value stuff randomly, it is really hard to know where you're pointing yourself. It's hard to know how to pick your battles, as it were. Okay, so this whole session I'm doing today, this is really going to be about picking your battles, because the important things need to have rules around them, and some of the stuff you just are going to have to let go in the context of that you just can't be on them about everything, and you don't want to be on them about everything all the time. Okay, so why does this matter to me, and why does this matter to you as my child? You can really learn something important about them in terms of why are they pushing back about a rule. If it's about homework, there can be a whole story about getting bullied at school, about not feeling smart enough, about being afraid that they don't understand, and they never want to sit down and do the work because it's just a reinforcement every time that they don't know the answers. And you might see it as just pushback about homework. But if you really take the time to dig in and say, why is it important to you? To not have any rules about homework. Why does that matter? That might be a whole interesting conversation, right? So the second thing after why does this matter is to explain a kind of meta version of why it matters to you to have this conversation, okay? So the first thing is to say something like, I'm your dad and it's my job to keep you safe. It's my job to keep you safe, right? This is like, I'm not some guy. Like let's connect here around my job as your father. The first job that I have to do is to keep you safe. And whatever you are trying to teach them, whether it's about the best bedtime or how much allowance to have, or dating rules or whatever, this is about your safety. That is always going to make them feel good. Even if they say, Dad, oh, kids want to know that their parents are there for them. There was a study done by the YMCA. It's probably 20 years ago now, but kids have not changed all of that much in that time. It was an anonymous survey of teenagers, thousands of teenagers, that showed the surprising result when the question was, what do you want to have more of? What do you most want to have more of in your life? The answer was not independence, and it wasn't money. It wasn't sex. It was more time with my parents. That was what they said when they knew that nobody was looking at who was the answer, right? So the most belligerent teenager somewhere inside themselves knows that what they really want is to be connected with their parents. And they want to be connected around these kind of conversations that make them feel safe, that make them feel respected and heard and seen, but that they don't want to feel that they're raising themselves. They really don't. Okay. So I'm your dad and it's my job to keep you safe. Write it down, stick it on your mirror. You can say it anytime. I love you, and that means I push you to be better than you think you can be. I'm your dad and I love you. And what that means is that I'm going to push you to be better than you think you are, to be better than you think you can be. That's what somebody does who loves you. I want to help you show up as the best version of you, right? That's another one that's easy to say. You can also say, I want to see your perspective. It's important to me to know, right? Who doesn't want to be seen? To engage in these kind of conversations. Why do you want more allowance? I want to know what's important to you. What do you need to have or be or show? How are you showing up in the world with your allowance? How is it getting you something that you want, right? How are you spending or saving or using your money? How can I help you learn to manage money? Good grief, right? What could be more important in the world than knowing how to manage your money? So to say, I want to see your perspective, I want to know your perspective, that is important to me. That's some major connecting that you're doing right there. And there's no way that any bio mom in the world is going to get in between that kind of moment. The third thing in this meeting is to invite your children, teenagers, to do some research to support their opinion. Like, I want to have no bedtime, or I think my bedtime should be 10:30 as a 7-year-old, whatever it might be. Okay. I'm just throwing it out there. Do some research. For some, that might be online research at the appropriate age. It might be from school. What do they say at school about this? Does your teacher ever talk about this subject? Right? I mean, all of these things, manners, boy, does that ever come up at school, right? What does your teacher have to say about being polite or having manners or being courteous or how we talk to other people? Like, asking them to reflect on what they heard at school is fantastic, because that even takes it right out of your arena, and they can say, oh yeah, okay, it's not just my dad telling me this. I heard that at school as well, which is a great antidote to when mom is telling them all of your dad's rules are stupid and you don't have to follow them. That's really disrespect. He's disrespecting you. You don't have to listen to him. If you can find a way to connect what you're trying to convey to something that they've already heard at school, that is going to cut that cord of where they're completely tied to their to the conditioning that mom is putting in about your rules and what they mean. So online, at school, ask your friends. Call up one of your friends. Nobody calls anybody anymore. Text one of your friends and find out if they have a bedtime on the weeknights, or a bedtime on the weekends, or during the holidays, right? Find out what other people are doing. And yes, you might have to grapple with the idea that, little Susie or little Johnny gets to go to bed at 11 o'clock or midnight, or they have no bedtime. We can talk about how to play that, but you have to see the truth. If the truth is that your child is surrounded by people who have no bedtime at all, then you need a different narrative to explain why your household has to be different. And you'll have to work on that, okay? And relatives, cousins, right? Maybe there are cousins in the family, or your nieces and nephews, whoever it might be, that you can say, you can ask to survey other family members and find out how those things are being dealt with, whatever it might be. Number 4, here's the big one: consequences. What is the reason for having consequences? What's the purpose of a consequence? Go ahead and put it in the chat if you're watching here, even on replay. I would love to hear from you. I would love to know your perspective on, why do you give consequences? Why are they important? So many people think that the point of the consequence is to deliver some kind of punishment for breaking the rule. And that's why dads can't do it, because you don't want to punish your children when they come to see you. every other weekend, or however, every other week, however often it might be, right? The purpose of consequences is to establish the hierarchy. It is not to deliver an appropriate punishment for the infraction. And it is so easy to establish the hierarchy. You can let go of how hard it is to give out a consequence when it's not about punishment anymore. You just need to reestablish yourself at the head of the hierarchy of your family, okay? So the consequence just has to be acknowledging that there's been an infraction of the rules. And the way that I would start out with this is to have the child offer what the consequence should be for a rule that gets broken. You would be shocked at how often the child will choose a harsher consequence than what you might have chosen. They want to play with this idea of boundaries. It has to be risky for them to go outside the boundary. So the consequence has to be something that's meaningful to them, not what you think is meaningful to them. So, you know, you could be proposing something that feels really harsh to you, and maybe it's, what am I trying to say? It might feel harsh to you and be meaningless to them. It might be something that is only going to upset them so much that they're going to complain to their mother. And there's going to be a whole shitstorm following on you giving out consequences for things. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to avoid all of that nonsense. Okay, so either in the same way that we've been talking about the rules, what should the rule be? We talk about what should the consequence be for breaking the rule, right? What is the consequence for not doing your homework? What is the consequence for staying out past your curfew? What is the consequence for having bad manners? Okay, engage them in deciding consequences. So then when the time comes, you are just delivering something that they decided was the consequence. And it's off your hands. You can reflect back and say, here's the paper where we wrote down, do you remember? So now you're going to spend 15 minutes in your room, or now you don't get, I don't know, whatever thing, but we're going to talk about taking things away in a minute. It's important to know what to take away and what not to ever touch as a consequence. However, you don't have to have consequences that the kids have built themselves. You can make consequences that are almost meaningless. And if you reverse engineer your day, your time with your kids in the right way, you always have something to take away, which is a consequence. So if you are frequently offering little bonus experiences, like if you do your homework before dinner, then you can have an extra spoon of ice cream in your dessert. Just saying, okay? If the homework doesn't get done, then you take away the extra spoon. You don't take away the whole dessert. You've asserted yourself that you did what you said you were going to do. If you do your homework before dinner, we'll go on a bike ride after supper. Or we'll go on an extra long bike ride after supper. It sounds like bribery, but it's not. It's a very carefully chosen way of undoing, in the alienation context, what mom is saying. Like, your dad is so unfair. I can't believe that he made you miss a party because you didn't do your homework. You know, if you put a little extra out, you can take the extra part away without taking away the thing. Like, you do not want to miss time riding a bike with your kid. That is your connection time. You don't want to miss that. So why would you ever take it away? You want to propose things that are okay. Like, if you have a bath and get all ready for bed, we'll read an extra story tonight before bed. If they don't do the thing, then you're only going to read the ordinary story, but you're not going to take away story time, because that is for you. That is your connection time with your child. You don't want to punish your kid by taking away something that you also benefit from. The foundational moments of connection time. You're not going to take that away, right? So you propose a little extra. We'll read an extra story, an extra chapter, an extra 5 minutes, whatever it might be. Are you catching my drift? I'll give you some more ideas. My husband had a great one when his kids were really little, and they would get very ramped up, as kids often do, in the days leading up to Christmas. And their mom would say things like, if you kids don't stop fighting, I'm going to take all your presents back to the store and you're going to get nothing for Christmas. Have you heard that before? So my husband would say, don't be ridiculous. You know, you're not going to actually do that. Why would you threaten something that you're not going to actually do? So what he would say is, if you guys keep fighting with each other, or every time I have to stop you from fighting, I'm going to add 15 minutes onto the waiting time for your presents at Christmas morning. So that by the time Christmas morning came, those kids sat in front of the tree for an hour because they had had so many episodes of adding 15 minutes. And you better believe they remembered it. It wasn't a, I'm going to say it wasn't a torture. It was a torture to wait. But the point was that they were being, it asserted him as the authority. I am doing what I said I was going to do. I'm not taking your presents away. Okay. I am making you understand that I am the boss. And it doesn't have to be a harsh punishment to do that. Okay. One time, his kids were whatever, not having manners or fighting when they weren't supposed to, whatever it was. And he had warned them that they were going to, have a bad surprise at the ice cream store or whatever. They all went to the ice cream store, and only the daughter, who was good, got the king size, and the 2 boys got the baby size cone. That's good, right? It's like, it's meaningful to them without saying you're not getting any ice cream, so that they can be gutted. You don't want them to be gutted. You want them to understand that you are the boss. That's all that it takes. The purpose of the consequence is to seat you in the right place in this hierarchy of your family. Okay? So just finally, consensus. Okay? The end of a discussion or a meeting should end with consensus, which means that everyone agrees. And that sometimes can take a long time. It takes longer than forcing a compromise. It definitely takes longer than imposing a decision. But I read somewhere, and it really made sense to me, that compromise is good for sort of short-term, urgent decisions, but consensus is important where the long-term relationships are what's really at stake. And that is what is at stake for you. It's your long-term relationship with your child, and it is your ability to stay close to them so that you can influence their development. Because that's what parenting is about. That's what being a father is about. You want to stay in the game and be able to lead them towards and then across the threshold of adulthood. That is your job as a father. So we have to take a long view, and we have to do things differently than you would do, maybe, if you were in a, 2-parent household. I mean, 2 biological parents. So one of the ways to encourage consensus, to encourage everyone to agree, is to float the idea of a trial period or something. So that's where you say, what if we try this for 2 weeks, and then we're going to meet again, and everybody's going to say how it's working out for them. And if you hate it, then we go back to the drawing board and we make a better rule, because everybody needs to be okay with this. They need to know that they're being heard, that their fears are being allayed. Like, what if I agree to this and then it's terrible and then I'm stuck with it? I want to see how this works out. Okay. I want to see how I feel in this new rule. Some new, a new allowance situation, just for instance, you have to try it out. You have to see how it works. And then you have a meeting again. Let's talk about allowance. How is this working for you? Okay. So baking that in to the process often facilitates arriving at consensus. It softens the position of somebody who's holding out because they can't quite imagine all the possible parameters of how this could play out. So we let it play out and then come back and talk about it after we've seen what's happening. That is a really, really great tool for getting everyone on board. It's even a great tool, dads, for getting biomom on board about a change that you really want to make that she is resisting, to propose a 2-week trial period or a 2-month trial period. It doesn't really matter what it is. If it's about school, what about a 3-month trial period? We're going to try it until Christmas, and then we'll sit down and have a really good talk about it. And if it's not working out, there's still time to change programs or transfer schools or whatever it might be. But you're giving the possibility that you will entertain a change if the real lived experience of this is not what everybody's hoping for. So I hope that was helpful. I hope it was helpful. Go back over this, listen to it again, write down the things. You can memorize those phrases and bust them out when you need them, right? I want to see your perspective. It's important to me to know how you think. Or, I love you, and that means it's my job to push you to be the best that you can be. I want to see you show up as who I know is your best self. I know what you're capable of, and I want to push you into being more than what you think you can be. Those are the kind of things that will melt a child's resistance to you. Okay? So reach out to me anytime. I'd be happy to have a 15-minute conversation with you. You can find me at tracy@undeletabledad.com. Thanks for listening. If you're not already listening to the podcast, you can find the Undeletable Dad podcast on Apple, on Spotify, on Google, on Amazon. It's on all the profiles. And there is an Undeletable Dad Facebook community that you're welcome to join. My website is undeletable.dad.com. And once again, it is tracy@undeletable.dad.com. See you next time.